Welcome to the introductory video to medieval Japan. This is Mr. Knox. And we're going to be talking about some samurai. I know you guys have all seen some videos or films about samurai slicing and dicing up their opponents, so stay tuned. We'll get right to it. First, we're going to start with location, though. We have Japan here in red on the map. It is an island nation. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. It's right off the coast of Asia, mainland Asia, and Russia and China and South and North Korea, right there. Now, why did a civilization start there on those islands? The main period of time that we'll be talking about today will be shortly after main contact with the mainland. So when the indigenous Japanese actually contacted China and Korea on the mainland and started to bring some stuff over. The islands were really good for fishing, and they had some limited natural resources, not that many. So you'll see people were fighting over it for a while. And again, I mentioned they borrowed a lot of ideas and systems from the mainland China. We'll start with classical, starting in 600. We'll move on to medieval in 1185, and finish in around 1868. Modern times. Now, again, medieval is a European term that was given to Japan because of its similarities in warring families, a lack of central government, and feudalism. The civilization in Japan originally rose in the classical age because of contact with China. They loved the Chinese culture and the government and the religion that they sent people over to learn more about it. You can see those arrows, they came in a couple different ways, and they borrowed all of these things listed here. So they took some religion in Confucianism, Buddhism. The indigenous Japanese already had Shintoism, which is more animist and believing that there are souls and spirits in every living thing. The Japanese also enjoyed the Chinese culture. They took the idea of centralized government, bring more order to the land, and they also took written and spoken language. Now, the Japanese had their own spoken language already. When they took the written Chinese language, though, it led to flourishing in literature, in literacy, and basically just in education in general. The Chinese language became the official language of the courts. And since men were the only ones allowed in the government and the courts, Chinese women started to experiment, and they contributed a lot to early Japanese literature. The Tale of Genji is one of the first novels ever written by Murasaki Shikibu. So Chinese language in the courts, Japanese language in the fields and in the cities. And along with the courts and the centralized government, there was strong leadership. There they wrote and spoke in Chinese, like I just said, and they focused on Confucian and Buddhist values. We've talked a little bit about loyalty and service to the state and people in Confucianism. We haven't really talked about Buddhist values, which is impermanence and suffering, and you'll see there was a lot of warring and a lot of death. So the whole idea of suffering and impermanence was accepted by many. After education thrived and the central government took control and led a prosperous economy, people started to fight for the land. It led to the Genpei Wars in 1185, when the Minamoto clan was victorious over the Taira clan. And slowly, the military people started to become more powerful than court officials and the imperial family. So we talked about the court. There was an imperial family. There was one emperor who was in charge until around these times. 1185 is the official year that we use. In 1185, when the Minamoto clan took over, the most powerful samurai became the shogun. Now, some around him and some less powerful samurai became daimyo, and then there were the rest of the samurai, or the military elite. They're all part of the same class. It's just one person rose to the top. And also I mentioned the Imperial family. Many believed, or most believed, that the emperor was a descendant of a god and he could never be removed as leader. So even though the shogun and the daimyo and the samurai had more power, he stayed in his ruling position as a figurehead, or people just looked up to him, kind of like England today, where the king and the queen and the princes and the princesses, they don't really make decisions for the government, but they do get to have a pretty nice life. Now, why was there a rise in feudalism? I mentioned the Minamoto clan won over the Taira, and there were just tons of people fighting each other. People were looking for security. They were looking for comfort. So they decided to be loyal to one person that had power. And it led to this triangle of power with the figurehead, emperor at the top, shogun, then daimyo, samurai. And peasants and artisans and merchants were dedicating loyalty to the people above them in return for protection. Eventually, in the 1600s, 3 strong daimyo reestablished order completely, and they kind of united most of Japan. They instituted a centralized government, so they still have the emperor. He's just kind of sitting around, hanging out, while the Tokugawa family and clan is ruling everything. They instituted some laws and reforms, and the middle class eventually gained more power, started to prosper. Growth in cities was rampant during this time, so people were moving in from the farms and the countryside. And also around this time were the Europeans. They were traveling all over the world. The age of exploration was happening. So this is when people were finding the American continents and traveling around the world and contacting with China and Japan and just Asia in general. So the leaders, the Tokugawa clan, they were very suspicious because they saw what some of these civilizations and countries were doing in the Philippines and in China. So they signed the Act of Seclusion in 1636, saying basically, we are secluding ourselves from everyone who happens to come in from Europe or from far away. We'll still trade a little bit with Korea and China, but anyone else, you're not allowed here. Eventually, though, you can't rule forever, and that Tokugawa clan lost power. Because in 1854, Commodore Perry, a U.S. Navy commander, he arrived with modern ships, or you can see here, steamships. They're made out of metal. The Japanese had these old ships, and they're like, oh man, we are going to lose this battle if we try and fight it. So they decided to open up their shores. They ended their isolationism. They started trading with everyone again. They dissolved the samurai class. So the shogun and the daimyo and the samurai lost most of their power, even though they were still gifted in war tactics and military battles. But central power was returned to Emperor Meiji, who just happened to be the emperor at that time. So again, Emperor Meiji, before the arrival of Commodore Perry and the opening up of their shores, he was a figurehead, and now they are open up to the world. This was basically the end of medieval Japan, because after this, they started to evolve, they started to modernize most of their cities, and they've modernized so much, they've become leaders in a lot of technology and things like that in our times today. So that is the end of our little video for medieval Japan. Hope you enjoyed it.